Sometimes the world seems to spin too fast, and it's good to remember that somewhere far away, there's a different rhythm, a slower, more welcoming rhythm. Take a deep breath, settle in, and let me take you to a small town in the heart of the North Pole. There, between eternal ice and northern lights, polar bears live their quiet lives, each with their craft, each with their routine. And today, we're going to follow a day in the life of someone very special, a bear baker who wakes before the sun rises to bring warmth and comfort to the entire community. Close your eyes, relax your shoulders, and let's go together to discover this place where time seems to move at just the right pace. In the town of Frostholm, built between ancient glaciers and natural caves, polar bears have developed a unique society over generations. The streets are wide enough to accommodate their robust forms, and the buildings are carved directly from compacted ice, with crystal windows that reflect the dancing lights of the sky. It's a small town where everyone knows each other by name, where the silence of the snow is interrupted only by friendly conversations and the soft crunch of paws on the icy surface. There's no rush here, no hurry. Each bear has their role, their function, their place in this perfect mechanism that has worked for decades. And among all the establishments that make Frostholm function, there's one that gives off an irresistible aroma, especially on cold mornings. Magnus Bakery. Magnus is a bear with dense fur slightly yellowed by time, with dark eyes that hold a natural gentleness. He's not the largest bear in town, nor the most imposing, but when he walks through the snow-covered streets, carrying his baskets of warm bread, it's hard not to smile at the sight of him. 30 years ago, he opened the doors of his bakery, a cave carefully adapted with stone ovens and shelves carved from the ice itself. The secret of his breads isn't just in the recipe, it's in the care, the patience, the respect for the time each dough needs. Magnus learned the craft from his mother, who learned from hers, in a tradition that crosses generations. And every morning, without fail, he wakes when the stars still shine in the sky to begin his work. Magnus' routine is like a silent meditation. He doesn't see his work as an obligation, but as purpose. While the city still sleeps, wrapped in the deep silence of the polar night, he's already up, preparing the furnaces, heating water, separating simple ingredients that will transform into something comforting. There's no music playing, no rush, just the rhythmic sound of his paws on the stone floor, the soft crackling of fire, the rustling of flour sacks. For him, these solitary hours before dawn are sacred. It's when he connects with his craft, when each movement becomes automatic, almost meditative. And it's in this state of absolute calm that the best breads are born, because they're made without tension, without urgency, only with presence. Outside, the sky begins to brighten slowly, passing from absolute black to deep shades of navy blue, then violet, then that pale pink that announces another day in the Arctic. Magnus doesn't even need to look outside to know. He feels the temperature change, notices the light beginning to filter through the small crystal windows of his bakery. In a few hours, the town will wake, and the first customers will begin to appear, attracted by the unmistakable aroma of fresh bread. But for now, it's just him, the dough rising slowly, and the comforting warmth of the ovens heating that cozy cave. It's in these moments that Magnus remembers why he chose this life. Why, even though he could do anything else, he loves being a baker. Today will be a day like the others, and at the same time, it will be unique. Because each day brings its small surprises, its small challenges, its small moments of joy. Magnus knows this. He learned, over the years, that beauty lies precisely in repetition, in consistency, in doing well what needs to be done. So, as you settle in to hear this story, let the peaceful rhythm of Frostholm lull your thoughts. Breathe slowly as Magnus breathes while he works. And let's go together to follow this day in the life of a bear who found his peace making bread. It's 3:30 in the morning when Magnus opens his eyes. There's no alarm clock. His body simply knows the time. 30 years doing the same thing, waking at the same hour, and his biological clock works with impressive precision. He rises slowly from his bed of moss and furs, stretching with a silent yawn that echoes slightly through the ice walls of his cave residence. Outside, the world is still plunged in the absolute darkness of polar winter, that dense darkness that seems to have weight. But Magnus doesn't mind. In fact, there's something comforting in this profound silence, in this feeling of being the only one awake while the entire town sleeps. He walks to the small spring of icy water that flows naturally from a crack in the rock, wets his snout, feels the cutting cold fully awaken his senses. It's time to work. The bakery is just a few steps from his home. He built everything connected to make the routine easier. Magnus pushes the heavy reinforced wooden door, and the cold night air momentarily invades the space. But soon he closes the entrance behind him and begins the usual ritual. First, the ovens. He walks to the 3 large volcanic stone structures that occupy the back of the cave, opens the iron hatches, and begins stacking dry wood inside each one. The wood comes from rare trees that grow in the few boreal forest areas south of town. Each log is precious, so Magnus chooses carefully, using only what's necessary. With a piece of flint and metal, he produces sparks that soon transform into small yellow flames. The fire begins to dance, timid at first, but growing gradually as he adds more wood. Within minutes, the heat begins to spread through the bakery, melting the ice on the windows, creating that cozy environment that everyone in Frostholm knows so well. While the ovens heat, Magnus goes to the shelves where he keeps his ingredients. Everything is organized with meticulous precision. Sacks of flour of different types, containers of sea salt harvested from the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, vessels of natural yeast he's been cultivating for years, wild honey brought by traders who travel to lands further south. He doesn't need written recipes. Each formula is engraved in memory, in muscles, in paws that have repeated these gestures thousands of times. He begins with the basic dough, the one that's served for the round breads everyone buys in the morning. He pours flour into an immense wooden bowl, creates a crater in the center with his paw, adds warm water, yeast, a generous pinch of salt. Then comes the part he loves most, mixing everything, feeling the texture changing under his claws, the dry flour gradually transforming into wet dough, then elastic, then smooth and silky. Kneading dough is almost hypnotic. Magnus leans, all his body weight, pushing the dough forward, folding it back, turning it 90 degrees, repeating the movement in a constant cadence. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. There's no rush. He knows the dough needs time, work, patience. Forcing the process only results in hard bread, without structure. So he continues, his strong arms moving with mechanical precision, while his mind wanders freely. He thinks about small things, the sound of snow falling outside, the northern lights that might appear later, the expression of little Freya, a bear cub of only 5 years, when she bites her favorite cookie. These simple memories warm his heart as much as the ovens warm the bakery. After 15 minutes of constant work, the dough is perfect, soft, elastic, almost alive under his paws. He places it in a large bowl greased with a bit of seal oil, covers it with a clean cloth, and leaves it to rest near the oven. Now it's just a matter of waiting for it to rise. But Magnus doesn't stop. While that first dough rests, he's already preparing the next batch. The dark rye breads, dense and aromatic, that the older bears prefer. Then comes the dough for the croissants, which requires different technique. Layers upon layers of butter between thin sheets of dough, folded and refold, until creating that flaky texture impossible to resist. It's meticulous work, almost artistic, and Magnus loses himself completely in it. The hours pass without him noticing. 3:30 becomes 4, then 4:30, then 5. The sky outside begins to lighten, moving from black to deep blue. The bakery is filled with the unmistakable aroma of baking bread, a smell that seems to embrace whoever enters, that brings childhood memories of home, of security. And Magnus, covered in flour, with aching but satisfied paws, looks at the rows of golden breads coming out of the oven and smiles. Another day beginning the right way. If you're enjoying following this peaceful day in Magnus' life, how about leaving a like on this video? It helps more people find these calm and cozy stories. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week there's new content waiting for you. Now let's continue, because the morning in Frostholm is just beginning, and we still have much to follow in the routine of this baker bear who found his happiness in life's simple things. At 6 in the morning, Magnus hears the first sound indicating the town is waking, the distant creak of an ice door opening, followed by the rustle of paws on compacted snow. He smiles, knowing exactly who it is. Like clockwork, every day without fail, old Gunnar is always the first customer. Gunnar is a bear with completely white fur, so ancient that no one knows exactly his age, but everyone agrees he was already in Frostholm when many of the current inhabitants hadn't even been born yet. He approaches the bakery with slow but firm steps, and when he pushes the door, a gust of icy air enters along with him. Magnus already has his bread ready, a dark rye bread, still warm, exactly how Gunnar likes it. They exchange few words. They never needed many. Gunnar nods. Magnus places the bread in a cloth bag, and the old bear leaves 3 silver coins on the polished ice counter. It's a dance they've done for decades, so familiar it needs no explanation. Soon after Gunnar, others begin to arrive. Frostholm awakens slowly, without fanfare, like everything in this town. First come the workers, the bears who take care of security patrols at the town's edges, those who maintain the ice structures in good condition, the fishermen who will depart for the frozen sea in search of fish and seals. They enter, greet Magnus with nods or small conversations about the weather, choose their breads, and head off to their duties. Magnus knows each one by name, knows what each one prefers. For Bjorn, the patrol chief, always a bread filled with dried reindeer meat. For Astrid, the silver-furred fisherwoman, 2 small oat breads with raisins. For the twin brothers Eric and Einar, who work on cave maintenance, for still steaming croissants. There's no menu in Magnus' bakery. He simply knows what each inhabitant of Frostholm likes, and makes sure to have everything ready. Around 7, the movement increases. Now the families arrive, mothers with small cubs, younger bear couples, the elders who wake later and come for breakfast in the small area Magnus maintains inside the bakery. There are some tables carved into the ice itself, with seal fur cushions to make the seating more comfortable, and a samovar always hot serving aromatic herbal tea that Magnus imports from distant regions. He likes this part of the day, when the bakery transforms into a meeting point, when conversations mix with the steam from the tea, when cubs' laughter echoes through the ice walls. Little Freya, whom he thought about earlier, arrives clutching her mother's paw, and her eyes shine when Magnus hands her a fish-shaped cookie covered with honey. She bites with a huge smile, and Magnus feels that warmth in his chest that no oven can reproduce, the simple satisfaction of making someone happy. Between serving customers, Magnus continues working. He never stops completely. There's always a new batch to prepare. There's always dough rising. There are always ovens to watch. But he does everything with impressive naturalness, alternating between talking with customers and returning to his tasks without ever seeming rushed or stressed. When young Ingrid, a she-bear who just moved to Frostholm, enters shyly and asks what he recommends, Magnus stops what he's doing, wipes his paws on an apron, and dedicates full attention to her. He explains about each type of bread, lets her taste small pieces, tells stories about the recipes, about where the ingredients come from. Ingrid ends up choosing a nut bread with honey and leaves the bakery smiling, feeling welcomed in this new town. Magnus returns to his ovens, checks the temperature by placing his paw near the opening, adjusts the amount of wood. Everything is a matter of feeling, of intuition developed over decades. The sun finally appears on the horizon around 8 in the morning, a pale, golden light that transforms Frostholm into a spectacle of reflections and sparkles. The ice crystals of the buildings capture the light and disperse it into thousands of small rainbows. Magnus likes to pause for a few moments at this hour, to go to the bakery door and simply observe. The town comes alive under sunlight. Bears walking from one side to another, cubs playing in the fresh snow that fell during the night, smoke rising from the chimneys of other caves. There's something deeply satisfying in being part of this, in knowing that his bakery is a fundamental piece of this community. That each bread he bakes isn't just food, but also comfort, tradition, home. He breathes deeply, feeling the icy air fill his lungs, and goes back inside. There's still much work ahead. The morning advances, and Magnus enters the most intense rhythm of the day. Between 9 and 10 in the morning, the bakery gets really full. It's when the bears who don't need to leave early for work finally appear. Artisans, teachers, those who work from home. Conversations overlap. There's laughter. There's the constant sound of coins changing paws, of little bags being filled with still warm breads. Magnus moves through the bakery with surprising efficiency for someone his size, serving one, baking another batch, answering questions, accepting orders for special events. A young she-bear named Helga is planning her wedding and wants Magnus to prepare all the breads for the party. He mentally notes the details: 50 round breads, 30 croissants, 20 sweetbreads with candied fruits. Helga is nervous, but Magnus calms her with his tranquil voice, guaranteeing that everything will be perfect. And she believes him, because Magnus has never failed. Never. That's his reputation in Frostholm. Consistency, reliability, quality that never varies. And he intends to maintain that until the last day he can hold a baker's peel. Around 10:30, the movement in the bakery begins to naturally diminish. Most of Frostholm's inhabitants have already passed by, already secured their breads for the day, already exchanged their morning conversations. Magnus takes advantage of this calm to do something he loves: prepare special orders and organize deliveries. Because, yes, Magnus doesn't just sell bread in the bakery. He also delivers personally to those who can't come to him. They're the eldest, the sick, those who live in the most distant caves of the town's limits. He could easily hire someone to make these deliveries, but he never wanted to. For Magnus, bringing warm bread to those who need, it is one of the most gratifying parts of his work. It's when he leaves the bakery routine, walks through the icy streets of Frostholm, sees the town from different angles, talks with bears he might not see otherwise. So he begins separating the breads into reinforced wicker baskets, wrapping each one in clean cloths to keep the warmth as long as possible. The first stop is always at old Sigrid's cave. She's over 100 years old, they say, and hasn't been able to leave home for a long time. Her paws are weak, her vision isn't what it used to be, but her mind remains as sharp as ever. Magnus carries a smaller basket, just with 2 sweet breads he knows she adores, and walks through the narrow streets leading to Frostholm's northern district. The snow crunches under his paws, and the morning sun creates a soft glow over everything. He passes other bears, greets each one, exchanges some words about the weather or about some town event. There's no rush, there never is. When he reaches Sigrid's cave, he knocks lightly on the ancient wooden door and hears her fragile voice inviting him in. The interior is warm, illuminated by oil lamps, full of fur rugs and memories of a long life. Sigrid is sitting in an armchair near the fireplace, and her eyes light up when she sees Magnus. They talk for a few minutes. Magnus is never in a hurry with Sigrid. She tells stories from old times, from when Frostholm was even smaller, from when she and her late husband built that same cave with their own paws. Magnus listens with genuine attention, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. He knows that, for Sigrid, these visits are more important than the bread itself. They're the moment of human connection, or, in this case, connection between bears. When he finally says goodbye, leaving the breads on a table within her reach, Sigrid holds his paw for an instant and says simply, "Thank you, Magnus." And he responds with a smile. "Always, Sigrid, always." Upon leaving the cave, he feels that comforting sensation of doing something that matters, something that goes beyond just baking bread. He's caring for the community, one delivery at a time. The second stop is quite different. Magnus walks to the eastern region, where Frostholm School is located. It's not exactly a regular delivery, but every Friday he brings sweetbreads for the cubs. It's a tradition that started years ago, when teacher Brynhild casually mentioned it would be wonderful if the little ones could have a special snack at the end of the week. Magnus didn't think twice. Since then, every Friday morning, he prepares extra breads especially for them. When he arrives at the school, a large cave adapted with natural lighting coming from openings in the ceiling, he's received by an explosion of energy. 15 bear cubs, aged between 4 and 8 years, run in his direction, shouting his name. Magnus laughs, a deep and genuine sound, and begins distributing the breads. Each cub receives one, and the gratitude in their shining little eyes is worth more than any payment. Brynhild thanks him as always, but Magnus just shakes his head. "No need to thank," he says. "This is the least I can do." There are still 3 deliveries to make, and Magnus sets off. The next is for Ragnar, a middle-aged bear who suffered an accident a few months ago and is slowly recovering. He lives alone in a cave to the south, and Magnus always brings nutritious breads, dense, full of grains and seeds that help with recovery. Ragnar is better than last time. He can move more easily, and there's color returning to his face. They talk about the improvement, about Ragnar's plans to return to work soon, and Magnus feels genuine pride in his friend's recovery. Then comes the delivery for the twin brothers who live together on the town's western border. 2 eccentric bears who live isolated, but who love sandwich bread. Magnus leaves 4 large loaves at the entrance of their cave, as agreed, and moves on. And finally, there's the delivery for the young couple who just had their first cub. They're exhausted, sleeping little, and Magnus knows a ready meal makes all the difference. He leaves a generous basket with varied breads and some extra cookies, along with a simple note. Congratulations. Enjoy every moment. When Magnus finally returns to the bakery, it's almost noon. He spent almost 2 hours walking through Frostholm, going up and down between different cave levels, crossing ice bridges over deep crevices, feeling the icy wind on his face and the pale sun slightly warming his fur. He's tired, but it's a good tired, the kind that comes from honest work, from fulfilled purpose. Upon entering the bakery, he finds some customers waiting, bears who came to pick up orders made previously, or who simply want fresh midday bread. Magnus resumes his position behind the counter, cleans his paws, adjusts his apron, and returns to work. Because the day isn't over yet. In fact, the afternoon part is just beginning. And Magnus, as always, is ready to continue doing what he loves, the way he's always done it, calmly, carefully, with absolute dedication to his craft. The afternoon in Frostholm has a different rhythm from the morning. It's more tranquil, more contemplative. Most bears are already busy with their daily activities, working, taking care of domestic chores, resting. The bakery stays almost empty, except for occasional visitors who enter in search of something specific or simply to escape the cutting cold outside. Magnus takes advantage of this calmer period to do what he calls fine work, the recipes that require more attention, more technique, more patience. Today, he decides to make spice cookies, those that everyone loves, but that he only prepares twice a week because the process is laborious. He separates cinnamon brought from distant lands, dried ginger, cloves, nutmeg. The aroma of these mixed spices is intoxicating, exotic, completely different from the clean, simple smell of fresh bread. Magnus works with total concentration, measuring each ingredient with precision, mixing everything until forming a golden, aromatic dough that needs to rest before being shaped. While the cookie dough rests, Magnus dedicates himself to another important task, cleaning and organizing. A bakery needs to be impeccable, and he learned this from a very young age. There's no point in making the best bread in the world if the environment isn't clean, if there's flour accumulated in corners, if the tools aren't properly cared for. So he sweeps the stone floor, removing flour and crumbs. He washes the large wooden bowls with icy water and soap made from seal fat. He organizes the shelves, checks the ingredient stock, mentally notes what needs to be replenished. Wood is running out. He'll need to place an order with the lumberjacks. Flour still has enough for one more week, but it doesn't hurt to order more. Honey is also low. Magnus keeps an old notebook where he writes these things down, with large, irregular handwriting. Polar bears weren't exactly made to hold pencils, but he manages. Organization is a fundamental part of the work, as important as knowing how to bake. Around 2 in the afternoon, Magnus hears the familiar sound of small, quick steps approaching. He smiles before even seeing who it is. The door opens and Sven enters, a cub of maybe 6 years, with fur still fluffy and white as freshly fallen snow. Sven comes always at this hour, after school, and always asks for the same thing, a small sweetbread and permission to stay nearby while Magnus works. The cub is curious, asks millions of questions, wants to understand how everything works. Magnus never minds. In fact, he likes the company. So Sven settles on a high stool that Magnus keeps just for him, bites his bread slowly, and begins the daily interrogation. Why does the dough need a rest? How do you know when the oven is hot enough? Where does the flour come from? Magnus answers each question with infinite patience, explaining in simple terms, showing when possible. He sees a bit of himself in that curious cub. He was also like that when young, always wanting to learn, always fascinated by the craft. Sven stays for almost an hour, watching Magnus shape the spice cookies. He uses metal cutters in varied shapes: fish, seals, stylized northern lights, small trees. Each cookie is carefully placed on a greased baking sheet, leaving space between them so they don't stick when baking. When the cookies finally go into the oven, Sven is mesmerized watching through the small glass window that Magnus installed in the oven doors. He sees the raw dough slowly transform, first becoming firmer, then beginning to brown at the edges, then becoming completely golden and fragrant. The smell spreading through the bakery is indescribable, sweet, spicy, welcoming. When the cookies come out of the oven, Magnus lets Sven choose one still warm. The cub bites carefully, blows because it's hot, and then his eyes widen with pleasure. "It's the best cookie in the world, Magnus," he says with absolute conviction. And Magnus laughs, ruffling the fur on top of Sven's head with his large paw. "I'm glad you like it, little one." Eventually, Sven's mother appears to pick him up, and the cub says goodbye with an energetic wave, promising to return tomorrow. Magnus waves back, feeling that familiar warmth in his chest. There's something special about seeing the new generation getting interested in the craft, even if Sven probably never becomes a baker. What's important is that he's learning to appreciate manual work, patience, the dedication necessary to do something well. Alone again, Magnus turns his attention back to the ovens. He checks the temperature, adjusts the wood, removes some bread trays that are already perfectly done. The work never really stops. There's always something baking, always something being prepared, always something that needs attention. But Magnus doesn't feel overwhelmed. In fact, he can't imagine his life any other way. This is his place, his vocation, his peace. The afternoon advances slowly, and Magnus finds himself thinking about how each day is unique, even while being the same. Same tasks, same schedules, same recipes, but there are always small variations. An unexpected conversation with a customer, a batch of bread that turns out especially perfect, the sunlight entering through the crystal windows at a different angle, creating new patterns on the ice walls. Magnus learned, over the years, to pay attention to these small differences, to find joy in minimal details. It's this that makes repetition bearable, even beautiful. He's not trapped in a monotonous routine. He's dancing a familiar dance, where each step is known, but where there's always room for small improvisations. And as the sun begins to descend slowly on the Arctic horizon, painting the sky with soft tones of orange and pink, Magnus continues working, satisfied with another day lived with purpose, another day doing what he was born to do. For in the afternoon marks the beginning of what Magnus calls the golden hour in Frostholm. The sun, which is already low on the horizon even at midday during polar winter, begins its final descent, and the light acquires an almost magical quality. Everything is bathed in tones of gold, pink, and violet. The ice buildings transform into luminous crystals, the shadows become long and soft, and there's a special quietness in the air. Magnus finishes cleaning the last cookie tray and walks to the bakery door to observe. This is his favorite moment of the day, when he can pause for a few minutes and simply exist. He leans his shoulder against the wooden frame, crosses his arms, and lets his eyes wander through Frostholm streets. Bears return home after work, walking without hurry. Cubs play in the snow, taking advantage of the last moments of daylight. Smoke rises from chimneys, creating lazy spirals against the colorful sky. It's in these moments that Magnus feels deep gratitude for living here, for being part of this community, for having found his place in the world. He goes back inside when he feels the cold beginning to penetrate his fur. Inside the bakery, the heat from the oven still keeps everything cozy, But Magnus knows that in a few hours, when he lets the fire go out, the temperature will drop drastically. For now, there's still work to do. He needs to prepare the doughs that will rest overnight to be baked tomorrow morning early. It's a process he does every day without fail. Prepare a large amount of basic dough, kneaded to the perfect point, divided into portions that he places in covered bowls and stores in a cooler part of the bakery. During the night, the dough will ferment slowly, developing flavor and texture. Tomorrow, when Magnus wakes at 3:30, it will be ready to be shaped and baked. It's a perfect cycle, a constant preparation for the next day. Magnus works with precise movements, his enormous paws surprisingly delicate when handling the dough. He doesn't need to think about what he's doing. The body already knows. The muscles have their own memory. While he works, Magnus hears the door open again. He lifts his gaze and sees Thora, a she-bear with grayish fur who works as a healer, the equivalent of a doctor in Frostholm. She looks tired, with visible dark circles even under her fur, and Magnus immediately knows it was a difficult day. Without saying anything, he takes 2 of the spice cookies he just made, places them on a small plate, serves a mug of hot tea, and indicates one of the tables. Thora smiles gratefully, sits with a deep sigh, and bites the cookie. Magnus doesn't ask anything. He just continues working, giving her the space to relax in silence. After a few minutes, Thora begins to talk. She tells about a cub who was sick, about how she was worried, but fortunately he improved, about the tiredness of caring for everyone in town. Magnus listens, offering words of support when necessary, but mainly just being present. It's another part of his work that no one sees. The bakery isn't just a place to buy bread, but also a refuge, a safe space where bears can simply be. Thora stays for half an hour, and when she finally gets up to leave, she seems renewed, lighter. Magnus refuses payment for the cookies and tea. Today it's on the house, he says. She thanks with a quick hug, the type of spontaneous gesture that only happens between old friends, and goes out into the night that's beginning to fall. Magnus watches through the window as she walks away, her silhouette becoming smaller and smaller against the darkening sky, and feels satisfied. It wasn't just Thora who gained something from his pause. Magnus did too. There's something deeply gratifying in offering comfort, in being the person others turn to when they need a moment of peace. His bakery, he realized over the years, is more than a business. It's an anchor point in the community, a constant place in a world that sometimes seems uncertain. And he takes this responsibility seriously. The sky is already completely dark when Magnus finally finishes all the preparations for tomorrow. It's almost 6 in the evening, a complete day of work, 14 hours since he woke in that cold dawn. He's tired, his paws ache, his back complains slightly. But it's a good tired, honest, the kind that comes from work well done. He walks through the bakery one last time, checking everything. Ovens almost extinguished, only weak embers still glowing in the back. Doughs prepared and covered, resting for tomorrow. Clean floor, organized tools, stored ingredients. Everything in place. Everything as it should be. Magnus takes his apron dirty with flour, folds it carefully, and places it in the laundry basket. Tomorrow he'll use a clean one, as he does every day. He extinguishes the oil lamps one by one, and the bakery gradually plunges into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of embers in the ovens and the starlight entering through the crystal windows. Before locking the door and going home, Magnus does one last thing. He goes to a small shelf where he keeps an old notebook, worn by time. In it, decades ago, he began writing simple thoughts about each day. It's not an elaborate diary, just a few sentences, brief observations. Today he writes, Sigurd was in good spirits. Sven asked questions. Thor needed rest. The cookies turn out perfect. Another blessed day. He closes the notebook, places it back on the shelf, and finally locks the bakery door. Outside, the cold of the polar night is intense, cutting, but Magnus doesn't mind. He walks the few steps to his cave residence, looks one last time at the starry sky where the northern lights begin to dance in waves of green and violet, and smiles. Tomorrow will be another day, and he can't wait to wake up and do it all again. Inside his cave residence, Magnus lights the oil lamps that illuminate the space with a soft, yellowish light. The interior is simple but cozy. There's a large bed made of dry moss covered with seal furs, some shelves carved into the ice wall, where he keeps personal belongings, a robust wooden table with 2 chairs, and a stone fireplace where he maintains fire during the coldest nights. The walls are smooth, polished by time, and reflect the lamplight, creating a soft, comforting glow. Magnus lets out a long sigh, finally feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders. He allows himself this moment, just standing still, breathing, feeling the warmth of the cave envelop his tired body. Outside, the Arctic wind begins to blow stronger, producing a low, constant sound that will be the soundtrack of another night in Frostholm. But in here, Magnus is safe, warm, at peace. The first thing he does is prepare something to eat. Ironically, despite spending the entire day surrounded by food, Magnus rarely eats while working. He prefers to save a meal for this moment, when he can sit calmly and appreciate. Today he decides to make something simple, a fish stew with vegetables that he left prepared last night. He places the iron pot on the fireplace, adds more wood to the fire, and waits for the stew to heat slowly. Meanwhile, he cuts thick slices of a rye bread he set aside for himself, butters them with reindeer milk butter, and prepares a large mug of herbal tea. The aroma of the stew beginning to bubble mixes with the smell of bread and butter, creating a combination that makes Magnus' stomach rumble. He smiles to himself. After 14 hours working, it's time to take care of himself too. Magnus sits at the table with his meal and eats slowly, savoring each forkful. The stew is perfect. The fish pieces melt in his mouth. The vegetables are tender, the broth thick and flavorful. The bread is fresh. The butter melts, forming small golden pools. He chews thoughtfully, letting his mind wander without specific direction. He thinks about the day that passed, the faces he saw, the conversations he had. He thinks about Sigrid and her stories, about Sven and his infinite curiosity, about Thora and her tiredness. He thinks about all the bears of Frostholm, each one with their lives, their challenges, their joys. And he thinks about how he, somehow, is part of all this. How his breads are a small but constant presence in each of their lives. There's something humble and grandiose at the same time in this perception. He's not curing diseases like Thora, not protecting the town like Bjorn and the patrol, not teaching the young like Brynhild, but he's feeding all of them, offering comfort, creating moments of simple pleasure. And that matters. It matters a lot. After eating, Magnus washes his utensils in a basin of cold water, storing everything in appropriate places. He's meticulous with organization, both at home and in the bakery. Each thing has its place, and keeping everything in order brings a sense of control, of stability. With the kitchen clean, he finally allows himself to truly relax. He walks to a wooden armchair covered with soft furs that sits near the fireplace, settles into it with a satisfied groan, and stretches his legs toward the fire. The warmth of the flames heats his aching paws, and Magnus closes his eyes for a moment, just feeling. These minutes of absolute quietness are precious. No customers to serve, no dough to knead, no immediate responsibility. Just him and the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of the wind outside. It's in this silence that Magnus finds renewal, that recharges his energies to do it all again tomorrow. He doesn't stay seated for long. Sleep hasn't arrived yet, and Magnus isn't one to waste waking hours. So he gets up and goes to a shelf where he keeps some books. There are few, maybe a dozen, all old, with worn covers and yellowed pages. Books are rare in Frostholm, difficult to obtain, expensive. But Magnus values the ones he has. There's one about baking techniques that he's read and reread for years, always finding some new detail. There's another about Arctic history, full of illustrations of distant places. And there's a small volume of poetry that belonged to his mother, the pages stained with flour from so much handling with flour-covered paws. Magnus chooses this last one, returns to the armchair, and begins to read by the faint light of the lamps. The poems are simple, about nature, about seasons, about love and loss. He's read them hundreds of times, but they never tire. There's comfort in familiarity, in revisiting known words, in feeling the connection with his mother. Through these pages, she also touched. Time passes without Magnus noticing. He reads poem after poem, occasionally raising his eyes to observe the fireplace flames or to take a sip of tea that has already cooled. There's no rush, no agenda. This time is his alone, to do whatever he wants, and he chooses to fill it with simple things that bring joy. Eventually, his eyes begin to grow heavy. It's not a bad tiredness. It's that pleasant drowsiness that comes naturally at the end of a productive day. Magnus closes the book, marks the page with a piece of worn ribbon, and places it back on the shelf. He checks the fireplace, making sure the fire is safe and controlled. He extinguishes the lamps one by one, leaving only one lit near the bed. The cave plunges into a welcoming penumbra, and Magnus feels he's finally ready to sleep. But first, there's one more small routine he never skips. Magnus walks to a small crystal window that's on the eastern wall of his cave. Outside, the polar night is in full splendor. The sky is completely black, dotted with stars so numerous and bright they seem impossible. And dancing among the stars, undulating in ethereal curtains of light, is the aurora borealis. Emerald green, violet, occasionally touches of pink and blue. The lights move slowly, as if breathing, as if they had life of their own. Magnus never tires of this spectacle. Even after decades living in Frostholm, seeing auroras almost every night, he still stops to observe, still feels that sensation of silent wonder. There's something about the northern lights that makes him feel small and, at the same time, connected with something much larger, as if the universe were dancing just for him, just for this moment. He stays there for several minutes, paws resting on the ice windowsill, eyes fixed on the sky, mind quiet and receptive. Eventually, the cold coming from the window begins to penetrate his fur, and Magnus steps away. He walks to a wooden chest that sits at the foot of his bed and opens it carefully. Inside are stored some precious things. Old hand-drawn photographs of his family, some silver coins that belonged to his grandfather, a small carved wooden medallion his mother used to wear. Magnus takes the medallion, holds it in his paw for a moment, feeling the familiar weight, the smooth surface polished by years of touch. His mother was the one who taught him everything about baking, who passed to him not just the recipes, but also the philosophy behind the craft. Patience, she always said. Respect for the process. Love for what you do. Magnus carries these lessons to this day. In each bread he bakes, in each customer he serves. He lightly kisses the medallion, as he does every night, whispers a silent thank you, and places it back in the chest. The bedtime preparation routine continues. Magnus goes to the water basin he keeps near the entrance, wets a cloth towel, and passes it over his face, cleaning flour that's still stuck in some places, refreshing his skin. The water is icy, almost freezing, and the cold shock is invigorating. He dries his face with another towel, then quickly combs through the fur on his chest with a natural bristle brush, removing knots and accumulated dirt. It's not a deep cleaning that he does once a week in a time-consuming process involving melted snow and special soap. But this quick nightly brushing helps him feel clean enough to sleep comfortably. Magnus is a bear of habits, and each small ritual has its purpose, contributing to the general feeling of order and control over his life. With everything ready, Magnus finally approaches the bed. It looks inviting, with the soft furs and dry moss that forms a naturally cozy mattress. He lies down with a deep sigh, his large body sinking into the malleable surface, and pulls a thick wool blanket over himself. The cold in Frostholm can be brutal during the night, even inside the caves, so he makes sure he's well covered. The last lamp still burns faintly beside the bed, and Magnus observes it for a few instants. The flame dances gently, projecting shadows that move across the ice walls. There's something hypnotic in the movement, something that calms the mind, that invites sleep. Magnus turns on his side, adjusting his head on a pillow stuffed with Arctic bird feathers, and lets his eyes slowly close. But before actually sleeping, he allows his mind to review the day one more time. It's something he does unconsciously, a kind of nightly meditation. He thinks about the doughs he prepared, the breads he baked, the customers he served. He thinks about Gunnar arriving punctual as always, about Freya biting her cookie with that huge smile, about Sven asking infinite questions. He thinks about the deliveries he made, especially Sigrid and her stories, how she seemed happy with the visit. He thinks about Thora, tired but relieved after sitting and having tea. Each interaction, each small moment of the day passes through his mind like a silent film. And Magnus realizes, as he realizes every night, that was a good day. Not perfect. No day is. There were small challenges, small frustrations. A dough that didn't rise exactly as he wanted. A slightly impatient customer. But overall, it was an honest, productive, meaningful day. And then, with this feeling of tranquil satisfaction enveloping him like the blanket covering him, Magnus finally lets sleep come. His breathing becomes slower, deeper. His muscles completely relax, releasing the day's tensions. The sound of the wind outside transforms into a kind of lullaby, and the darkness of the cave becomes welcoming instead of threatening. The last lamp goes out by itself, the flame dying naturally when the oil runs out, and Magnus doesn't even notice. He's already sliding gently into sleep, into dreams, into well-deserved rest. Tomorrow will be another day. 3:30 in the morning will arrive, as it always arrives, and he'll wake ready to do it all again. Because this is his life, his choice, his purpose, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. In the absolute darkness of the cave, Magnus sleeps deeply. His chest rises and falls in a constant rhythm, his breathing producing a soft sound that mixes with the night silence. Outside, Frostholm also sleeps. All caves dark, all streets empty, only the wind and snow and stars as witnesses. It's the quietest hour of the polar night, when the world seems suspended, when time seems to stop. Magnus dreams, although he won't remember these dreams in the morning. He dreams of rising breads, of hot ovens, of familiar faces smiling. He dreams of his mother teaching him to knead dough when he was still a small cub, his paws barely reaching the work table. He dreams of Frostholm on an unlikely summer day, when the sun never sets and the ice shines with blinding intensity. They're good dreams, tranquil, reflections of a life lived with contentment. The hours pass silently. Midnight comes and goes. 1 in the morning. 2. Magnus continues sleeping, his body recovering from the day's work, his muscles repairing, his energy renewing. There are no nightmares disturbing his rest, no worries stealing his sleep. He conquered, over the years, that which many seek but few find, genuine peace of mind. The certainty of doing exactly what he should be doing, of living a life that is truly his. There are no regrets about paths not taken, no questions about different choices. Magnus knows, deep in his soul, that he was born to be a baker, that this is his contribution to the world. And this certainty gives him a type of tranquility that is rare and precious. Around 3 in the morning, something subtle begins to change. Magnus' sleep becomes less deep, his body naturally beginning the awakening process. It's not abrupt, it's gradual, gentle, the internal biological clock doing its work with precision. He moves slightly under the blanket, turns from one side to another, his eyes still closed, but no longer in deep sleep. Dreams begin to dissolve, images becoming less clear, consciousness beginning to emerge slowly. Magnus doesn't fight this process. He accepts it, knowing that soon it will be time to get up, to begin a new day. There's a gentle expectation in his chest, not anxiety, but rather tranquil anticipation. Because he likes his work, likes waking early, likes the feeling of starting before the rest of the world awakens. 3:20. 3:25. Magnus breathes more deeply, stretches his paws under the blanket, feels the cold air on the tip of his snout that's exposed. Outside, the stars continue shining, the aurora borealis continues dancing, the wind continues blowing. Nothing has changed, but everything is about to change. Because in a few minutes, Magnus will wake. And when he wakes, the bakery will come to life again. The ovens will be lit, the doughs will be kneaded, the breads will begin to bake. The aroma will spread through the streets of Frostholm, and one by one the bears will wake, will smell that comforting scent, will know that Magnus is already working. And there will be comfort in that inconsistency, in the certainty that some things never change. That no matter what happens, no matter what challenges the day brings, there will always be warm bread waiting at Magnus Bakery. 3:30. Magnus' eyes open. There's no confusion, no moment of disorientation that many feel when waking. He simply opens his eyes, completely awake, completely present. The cave is dark, but he doesn't need light to know what to do. He's done this thousands of times. He sits up in bed, stretches at length, feels his bones crack satisfyingly. He places his paws on the cold stone floor, feels the icy shock fully awaken his senses. For a brief moment, he just sits there, breathing, centering himself. And then, with a small smile no one sees, Magnus gets up. He walks to the spring of icy water, wets his snout as he does every morning. He feels the cutting cold, feels life pulsing in his veins. He's ready. Another day beginning. More breads to bake. More people to serve. More purpose to live. And as Magnus pushes the door of his cave residence and walks the few steps to the bakery, as his paws leave fresh tracks in the snow that fell during the night, as he opens the heavy door and enters the familiar space that's almost an extension of himself, there's something deeply beautiful happening. It's not dramatic, not grandiose. It's just a baker bear beginning another day of work in a small town of the North Pole. But there's beauty in it. Beauty in repetition, in consistency, in silent dedication to a craft. Beauty in doing well what needs to be done, day after day, year after year. Magnus isn't famous, won't be remembered in history books, won't change the world with great deeds. But he touches lives, one at a time, one bread at a time. And perhaps, in the end, that's what really matters. Not the grand gestures, but the small acts of kindness and competence repeated infinitely. The world needs heroes, yes, but also needs bakers. It also needs Magnus. Magnus lights the first furnace of the day, watching the flames gain life slowly. The fire crackles, the wood snaps, and warmth begins to spread through the still dark bakery. He does this with the same attention as always, with the same care, as if it were the first time, but also with the familiarity of someone who has already repeated this gesture 10,000 times. And there's something comforting in that, in this conscious repetition, in this daily choice to do well what needs to be done. Magnus walks to the bowls where the doughs rested during the night, removes the cloths covering them, and smiles seeing how perfectly they've risen. They're ready, and so is he. Another day of work, another day of purpose, another day living the life he chose for himself. Outside, Frostholm still sleeps under the mantle of stars, but soon it will wake. And when it wakes, there will be warm bread waiting. Because there always is. Because Magnus is here. There are many ways to live a meaningful life. Some people seek grand adventures. Others pursue great ambitions. Still others look for fame or fortune. Magnus chose something different. He chose the silent mastery of a simple craft, chose to serve his community with consistency and care, chose to find joy in the small things that repeat every day. And in that choice, in that tranquil dedication to making bread in the best way possible, he found something many spend their entire lives searching for without ever finding. Peace, contentment, the deep certainty of being in the right place, doing the right thing, being exactly who he should be. There's no restlessness in Magnus, no desire to be someone else or be somewhere else. He's at home in the deepest sense of the word, at home with himself, at home with his work, at home in Frostholm. As Magnus kneads the first dough of the day, his thoughts wander to all those who will bite his bread in the next hours. Sigrid, who will wake soon and have breakfast with the sweet bread he left yesterday. Gunnar, who must already be preparing for his morning walk to the bakery. Freya, who will ask her mother to buy fish-shaped cookies. Sven, who will appear after school with his infinite questions. Thora, Bjorn, Astrid, Helga, Ragnar, all of them. Hundreds of bears, each with their lives, their challenges, their joys. And Magnus, somehow small but real, is part of all these lives. His breads are on their tables, are part of their meals, create memories for them. And that's more than enough. That's everything. Perhaps true wisdom isn't in achieving great deeds, but in doing simple things well. In finding beauty in routine, meaning in repetition, purpose in silent service. Magnus never thought much about life philosophy. He simply lives his one day at a time, one dough at a time, one bread at a time. But if someone asked him what the secret of his happiness is, perhaps he'd say something simple. Love what you do. Do it well. Be consistent. Care for the people around you. Find joy in small details. It's not complicated, not mysterious. It's just living with attention, with presence, with gratitude for the simple things that make life good. And perhaps, in the end, that's what we're all seeking. Not greatness, but goodness. Not fame, but peace. Not extraordinary, but extraordinarily well done ordinary. The sun will begin to rise in a few hours, painting the Arctic sky with those soft tones of pink and orange that Magnus loves so much. The town will wake, the streets will fill with life, and another day in Frostholm will unfold with its tranquil and comforting rhythm. Magnus will be here, as he always is, doing what he always does. And there will be beauty in it. There will be purpose. There will be love. Because he chose this life consciously, embraced it completely, and found in it everything he needed. There are no regrets, no questions, no desires to be or have more. Just deep and lasting contentment. And as you listen to this story, as you follow this simple day in the life of a baker bear in a distant town of ice and snow, perhaps there's something here for you too. A reminder that happiness doesn't need to be complicated, that purpose can be found in the simplest things, that a well-lived life doesn't need to be extraordinary in the world's eyes, just true to your own eyes. And now, as Magnus continues his work under the stars of Frostholm, as the aroma of fresh bread begins to fill the bakery, as another day is born tranquil and full of possibilities, it's time for you to completely relax. Let this cozy story settle in your heart like a gentle memory. Breathe deeply. Release any tension still remaining in your shoulders. Allow your body to sink into the surface where you're lying. In a few moments, soft music will begin to play. Let it cradle you, calm your mind, gently guide you towards sleep. You deserve this rest, this peace, this moment of absolute quietness. So close your eyes, relax, and let the music take care of you. Good night, or good rest, whatever the hour. And may your dreams be as tranquil as a day at Magnus Bakery, in Frostholm, where time moves slowly and everything is always well.